Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see you today. My name is Dustin Cormier, and this is How to Rock Astrology. Today, we are going to be unfolding the narrative that is any Pluto aspect to the moon. Now, Jeffrey Wolf Green in his book has... this isn't actually the book. This is going to be continuing our reading from Pluto, the Evolutionary Journey of the Soul. Excuse me, I got the hiccups. Hopefully, it's more burps. So, we're going to be reading from Jeffrey Wolf Green's book, Pluto, the Evolutionary Journey of the Soul. And in Jeff Green's book, prior to the section talking about Pluto's aspects to the planets, he has a big section talking about the nature of the different aspects, whether the aspect is ahead or behind the planet, whether Pluto's aspect is in ahead or behind the planet. For example, if Pluto is in 20 degrees of Cancer, let's say we have Mars at 19 degrees of Scorpio. That means that the Pluto trine is slightly ahead of Mars, and that will have a slightly different effect of Pluto's effect having progressed past the more intense period for that regard. It's coming up to Pluto's aspect coming up to the planet, I believe, is the one that has the deeper signification of intensity and karmic retribution needing to be done. But I digress. I'm a bit more of a tropical Vedic astrologer myself, and I go by a different schema than the typical Western one. But as Jeffrey Wolf Green is a Western astrologer, I'm going to be true to his text and read his text as he describes it the whole way through. But before we do, I'd like to first talk a little bit about the moon and what I consider the moon to be, and how we can sort of get a background for the rather cryptic information that Jeffrey Wolf jumps right into in his description of Pluto aspects to the moon. So the moon is the Jivatman, in a way it's the receptive receptacle which holds and necessarily maneuvers the will and willpower of the sun. It's the personality. And in order to get a little bit of a sense of what the moon is all about, I want to do a little bit of a reading from a revered book of mine. It's The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology by Richard Fish and Ryan Kirksack. If you're not a Vedic astrologer, my conception is that there are things which it's just Vedic has become my root in a lot of ways, although my root really is Western. But I appreciate this description of what the moon is and what it means. And that's why I'm including this description of the moon in this video. And it's just going to be a short one to get us bearing on Jeffrey Wolf Green's derivation. So the moon, called Chandra in Vedic Jyotish. Just as the sun represents the yang, self-expressive side of our nature, so the moon represents the more receptive, feminine, and imaginative side. A strong moon causes us to be strongly influenced by moods and emotions, to have a good memory or attachment to the past, and to place much importance on the home and family. Of course, all of these things will be augmented by the presence of Pluto's aspect, whether Pluto causes a confrontation with our receptivity to moods, whether it chokes our reception of our own inner feelings so that we have to have an inner implosion, which causes us to confront the fact that our emotions, our mind, the reality of our internal feelings is important, and we can't just ignore it just because some trauma from our past has blocked us from doing that. If Pluto can choke our reception of our own feelings of who we are and our own balance and our own limits and our own enjoyable personalities and subjective meaning in life, and when Pluto obstructs that, it can either keep suppressing it until we get on top of it through lifting the heavy weight that is the karma of Pluto. And that can make us, if Pluto can either squash us ultimately, or eventually on lifetime after lifetime, we're going to get enough of imprints of failing or suffering through the Pluto obstruction that eventually our genetic memory will learn how to get on top of it and to move past the Pluto energy at the very subtle, receptive way that Pluto tends to do. But before that, there's going to be a lot of obsessive compulsive energy, darts thrown wildly at the wall, lots of marks missed in many incarnations of just pouring out emotional energy uselessly until we start to realize that we are separate from the process and can be discerning about how we react to our reactions. Pluto will cause confrontations that will force us to do this. And this is what the moon is all about. It signifies the mind, the manas, as we're going to see. So more than any other planet, much depends on the moon's distance from the sun and the influence of other planets on it in determining in the manner in which the moon affects us. So Pluto's effects on the moon are going to deeply amplify or obstruct, thus eventually leading to implosive activation of any planets that aspect the moon and vice versa. The moon signifies the mother and the mind. The mother in the sense meaning like the childhood memory, the basic foundational narrative upon which the person ultimately goes into their lives with. The mother is responsible for a child's formative mental impressions of the world, right? Having Pluto's dark energy, the controlling mob, subconscious, trying to be careful energy impressed into us through the moon means it's going to, be a deep part of our basic conception of reality, for better or worse. But again, anything compressed can lead into a diamond later in life if this energy is realized and reconceived and resolved through therapy, usually involving some kind of heavy metaphysical therapy for this kind of position, particularly if it's ill-placed. Ultimately, if the moon is well-placed, if it's close to its exaltation point, close to the fourth house cusp, if it has positive aspects from its friends, Sun and Jupiter, and Mercury, if it's delighted by Mercury, if it's in a good house, in a good sign, ultimately all these things will add to the moon's capacity to get on top of whatever's blockage Pluto has on it. And Pluto can ultimately actually give an even deeper inner resolve through these external confrontations and just heavy things in life. Pluto, obviously, as an outer planet, we know, Pluto is only going to amplify the karma and the energy that you put it in. So this could be a personality who has great depths of internal emotional strength caused by their being yanked around so much that their inner spine develops a firmity that can get yanked around and still stay centered at the same time. Can even use this emotional energy strongly, can move the masses even sometimes, these people can. Or they can stand up for themselves even as an oceanic current of mob energy, of social anxiety, collective repression, or just anything. This could be a person who can stand up for their own emotional needs despite the disparity of an ocean of confrontation, if the moon is well placed being the key. Pluto in ways is often like a dumbbell. You know how some people when they go hiking, they climb a hill, they climb a mountain, and they throw on a 20-pound dumbbell on their backs, and it's tougher tougher to get through the sludge. Everything is obsessively, compulsively amplified with the weight of 10,000 incarnations of stale karma. But if you can climb the mountain of this incarnation, get through your things, still have a subjectively meaningful life, despite this 20-pound thing, this 20-pound weight on you, imagine how much lighter things will be in those moments when Pluto is not obstructing you and you can be in the fullness of whatever confrontations you've gotten over through this Pluto energy. Shows a deep spiritual retribution of any kinks involving the moon if it's well placed. If it's not well placed, then it's leading to that. I digress. Now, ultimately, the moon represents the emotional and instinctive side of the mind, the manas. And it shows how we instinctively express our ego, feelings, and emotions. And if anything happens that obstructs these, we are going to see the sorts of things that we're about to read from our next reading, talking about Pluto and Pluto's aspects to the moon. Now, that was an 11-minute introduction. I expect this video to be rather long compared to the other planetary aspect videos. So I better get going. This is Pluto, an aspect to the moon by Jeffrey Wolf Green. The prior evolutionary intent of this aspect was to eliminate all external dependencies in order to induce the lesson of internal security. In addition, this aspect has served to reformulate or transform the individual's instinctive emotional reactions to any internal or external circumstance. In both ways, the individual has been learning to transform the self-image, how he or she sees, identifies, and relates to him or herself. Often this aspect has promoted emotionally difficult experiences with female or mother-type figures. Commonly, the female figures or mother types have been extremely dominant, control-oriented people with an intense and rigid standard of conduct or behavior that was projected upon the person with this aspect. When the individual failed or refused to conform to these compulsive dictates and expectations, emotional blows or attacks were delivered upon the individual. Or what's also happens is that female or mother type withheld emotional expression in icy silence. The vibratory projection of disapproval, letdown, or hurt permeating their auric field. In either case, the individual was thrown inward to induce the necessary evolutionary lesson. As a result, these individuals commonly have displaced and unresolved emotional needs and problems that are projected via expectations upon others. When others do not meet these displaced emotional needs, nor solve their problems, the projection of emotional rage or anger will result. This experience, of course, enforces a confrontation with others, through which the individual, again, is thrown inward. In another common reaction to this process, the individual will withhold emotional relations with another when his or her deep-seated needs are not being met. The intensity and degree of these experiences can be linked to how new or old this evolutionary process is, and with the type of aspect formed with Pluto. So this is what I was talking about. This is Jeffrey Wolf's ideation here. For example, he says that a client of mine who had Pluto in Leo, which is retrograde, conjunct Saturn retrograde in the 9th house, which was in conjunct Pisces moon in the 4th house. This person experienced the separation of his parents when he was 6 years old, a young age. He was put into an orphanage at that time. Now, the parents subsequently got back together and brought him home. Yet when he was 10 years old, he overheard his parents discussing the fact that they did not like him and wished that he had not been born. Upon hearing this conversation, he left home and walked 25 miles to his godmother's house. The godmother loved him, but the parents took him back. Thus, he was forced to live in an environment wherein he was not accepted. He was not accepted, loved, or understood for that matter. Because the inconjunct aspect to Pluto was 4 degrees after the exact aspect, the psychological and emotional effect of this rejection was not severe. He actually had memories of being through these kinds of experiences in other lives, and had more or less learned to minimize his emotional expectations and dependencies. The evolutionary need to come through this kind of parental environment was to induce the final lessons to this end, meaning that this whole experience was an evolutionary intent, which was to have an internal stability regardless of the external fluctuations and confrontations with their emotional reality. And this person had kind of been through this ringer a little bit, so they started to understand what was going on here, and they had already started to internalize their own emotional foundation within themselves. Now, if you're looking for the specifics of whether the moon was ahead in that trine or whether Pluto was ahead in that trine, I have to admit that I have not. No, that's a part of this book that's actually, I can go right back here and poke at. But the specifics of it are quite long and rather complex. So we'll see if I eventually get to that part of the book. As for right now, I can't give you the specifics on it. Feel free to read his book yourself if you want to get that specific. Now, I'm more interested in Pluto aspects in general, the themes of Pluto coming into confrontation with the moon in any way. Now, Jeffrey Wolf continues. Conversely, some of these individuals will come through or be exposed to female or mother-type figures who do encourage emotional self-reliance and inner security. This is more like a person who has a good moon with this Pluto aspect. Then the Pluto is amplifying the positive aspects of the moon's qualities. These female or mother types will have the ability to penetrate and understand the emotional dynamics of these individuals, and in so doing, help them to unravel the bases and causes of their emotional winds, moods, and feelings. The evolutionary intent of this aspect demonstrates that these individuals have been learning how to reformulate their emotional conduct and self-image. Emotions can be compulsively expressed when Pluto aspects the moon. The person may emotionally and intellectually resolve to operate in a different manner, yet, much to their own horror, find themselves manifesting an old compulsive pattern in emotional behavior. It's like, what the hell? I thought I was done with this thing. I stopped smoking cigarettes a year ago. Now, all of a sudden, a year and a half later, some confrontation happens and someone's smoking a cigarette, and it's like, bang. I thought I was done with this. This situation promotes self-rage, anger, and hatred on a cyclical basis, because the individual feels powerless to change the pattern, even when the desired intent is to do so. In the worst scenarios, this dynamic can promote thoughts of suicide or a subconscious death wish, as the individual seeks to escape the pain that characterizes his or her emotional life. This can make some rather gothic, emo types of personalities. These individuals have been learning how to shed light upon their inner emotional dynamics, how and why they work the way they do, and for what reasons. As a result, they will be intensely focused upon the emotional dynamics, intentions, and motivations of others in order to learn where they are coming from. Based on their own emotional compression and intensity, they commonly have an innate ability to understand the emotional psychology of other people if the aspect between Pluto and the moon is relatively old, having congested for a long time. Some will compulsively attempt to reformulate the emotional expression and self-image of others, just as the female or mother type attempted to do in the individual's own life. In other words, they duplicate the behavior of the mother or the key female types in their life, for better or worse, whether they enjoy that about themselves or not. Most people will not tolerate such emotionally overbearing behavior for long. Many relationships approached in this way terminate in confrontations and emotional shocks, especially because the moon, being a feminine planet, grounding us in our reality and the love we attract on planet Earth, the moon is therefore a deeply important planet with regards to relationships, marriage, the domestic side of marriage, as opposed to, the fourth house dimension of things, as opposed to the Venusian seventh house dimension of things. When others do not conform or meet the emotional demands and needs of the Pluto moon person, they can become very cruel, vindictive, spiteful, and jealous. Just intrinsically, it's a thing that happens. Some will become physically violent when inner turmoil and rage breaks loose from the tight reins of control that the individual normally maintains. On the other hand, some Moon-Pluto individuals will attempt to motivate others through helping them unravel their emotional dynamics in a non-manipulative way, where they can hold any dynamic, even just feeling receptively another person's emotions from deep, deep places that both of them don't even know where they're coming from. The Pluto moon person can just look in the eyes, see it, feel something there, and unwittingly or not, draw out these deep emotional ramparts of the other person so that the other person can figure it out for themselves. They just need somebody to sit with them, and it's like, be vulnerable enough. They need somebody like you, the moon and Pluto person, to have the patience and space to allow them to be vulnerable, to draw out that emotional torrent which you saw in their eye. And then they can unspool it themselves, because you know that that's what you want. You wanted somebody to do this for you, and now you can do it for them. This is the kind of positive expression of this moon and Pluto that can be expected. They will encourage emotional self-reliance and inner security, not dependency upon the moon-Pluto person. Such individuals will likely have experienced female or mother types who did this for them, or they have evolved into this condition through the emotional school of hard knocks. Once the lesson of internal security has been consciously sought out, once the lesson of internal security has been consciously sought or initiated as a result of this evolutionary process, all the negative emotional behavior progressively turns positive. Progressively, these individuals learn to fulfill their own emotional needs, and in so doing, they free themselves to operate within relationships and life in a non-demanding, self-secure way. Now they can display patience and tolerance where there was once an intolerance and a lack of patience and adaptability. Now they can encourage inner emotional growth, health, and independence in others. Where the individual once repelled others, now he or she magnetically attracts others because they recognize his or her natural healing abilities, which is very possible and true for this person. If they are on the positive side, and if they get on the other side of the negative Plutonian obsessive compulsive blocks and evolutionary lesson patterns. The moon represents the psychological function of the ego. Those with Pluto in aspect to the moon have been learning how to focus the power of their souls through the conscious ego. As a result, they can be incredibly self-determined and single-minded in their pursuit of an objective, whatever that objective might be. They can harness the penetrating quality of Pluto to uncover the bottom line of how anything is structured or works. In so doing, these individuals will instinctively know how to manipulate or use the means necessary to accomplish whatever goal or task they desire to fulfill. This means that the means of this can be ruthless or manipulative through negative expression, or extremely above board when positively expressed. These individuals commonly have a deep and penetrating gaze because of the moon's symbolic correlation to the retina in the eyes. The force of their souls is reflected through their eyes as they attempt to penetrate to the core of others to see where another is coming from. Because the moon also constitutes our personal environment, Pluto moon individuals can tend to dominate their environments through the sheer intensity of their energy field that is instinctively expressed through their egos. This dominance can be expressed through utter silence as well as through communication or action. In either case, their presence is felt by others, whether it's silent or it's not. Often, they suffer or experience misinterpretation of their intentions because of this intensity. This occurs because the intensity of their emotional body and energy field can create an enigmatic effect compounded by the natural secretiveness and mystique of Pluto. This kind of environmental experience can be very frustrating for these individuals. From an evolutionary point of view, this kind of environmental challenge is meant to draw the person out of him or herself to develop an awareness of what he or she is actually feeling or thinking. This challenge also promotes an inner examination that allows for the individual to check out his or her motivations, intentions, or the basis of what is occurring from within that creates this kind of challenge. An inner examination must occur because these individuals cyclically shut down on an emotional basis. The danger in shutting down is one of emotional and psychological implosion, wherein all perspective is lost. If the individual is in a shutdown cycle, then the challenge from the environment will attempt to pull the person out of it. If the individual is in an animated state, then the challenge from the environment will attempt to question the basis of where the individual is coming from. Often this challenge is met with resistance, as the individual refuses to reveal what is happening inside them. Or the individual may refuse to accept or acknowledge the correctness of another person's perception or insight when challenged in this way. This issue is very important to understand for those who interact with these individuals. It's important because, by nature, the Moon-Pluto person needs to cyclically shut down in order to replenish their emotional batteries. They also need to shut down because they are cyclically consumed by the unconscious force of their souls. This occurs simply in order to induce knowledge or perspective, or to release a new seed thought, feeling, or emotion from the soul to the conscious ego at key times in the evolutionary journey. Deep stuff. Thus, the balance between necessary shutdown time and animated time is critical. It's crucial. Too much of either will promote distortion and the loss of a center of gravity for these people. When challenges occur from the environment with respect to each cycle, these individuals should learn to pay attention to them because they are normally signals that an extreme is being reached. If the individual is in an animated state, then these challenges will reverse the flow because of the animated responses that they demand. Paying attention to these environmental signals can promote a state of emotional and psychological balance in these individuals. Resisting these signals can promote imbalance. The signals from your own body, for better or worse, are going to be found through the shaking up of and the controlling, the constricting, and then the opening, constricting, opening, confronting that Pluto is going to do to the moon here. Moon-Pluto individuals are also emotionally sensitive to an intense degree. Conditions in their environment have to be just right. If they are not, then they may become very upset and attempt to make it right. The behavior of others must conform to their standards of conduct. Of course, this expectation promotes confrontations through which the individual learns to change his or her instinctive emotional responses to anything that does not reflect the standard of right conduct. The obvious limitation of their rigid and fixed standards must be confronted so that a metamorphosis can occur. The individual then learns that other standards of conduct, values, needs, and beliefs are just as powerful, legitimate, and relevant as his or her own. This aspect also commonly promotes intense emotional and sexual needs, again, for better or worse. A cyclic buildup of emotional energy demands release, projection, or expression. This release can take place through sexual activity. The sexual needs projected upon others can be quite intense and demanding if the individual has not learned the lesson of emotional self-sufficiency. That's a lesson you're deeply going to have to learn with this placement. A lesson which leads into sexual self-sufficiency, which includes masturbation. Sexual release promotes emotional stability and healing for these individuals. Normally, the sexual release, i.e., orgasm, is utterly consuming and total. For a while, the individual can be at ease and in an emotionally relaxed state as a result, for a while. So it is a good idea for Moon Pluto individuals to commit themselves to an intense and concentrated program or system that allows for a personal transformation or repolarization of their instinctive emotional reaction patterns so that they are able to adjust to life in a more objective and open manner. Therapy, Taoist, Reiki, Qigong, Tantric, Taoism, all these things are examples of the type of thing that might be useful. This is a good idea because many of the emotional memories that are held in the unconscious are painful and difficult. These memories dictate their emotional reactions in a compulsive and quite irrational manner. These individuals can become consumed by their own moods, feelings, and emotions. These moods, from the darkest to the brightest, and all shades in between, originate in the distant and unconscious memories. The need to gain perspective and control of these states is critical. When the light turns red, it doesn't matter how safe things are in between all the other moments. If things screw up when the light turns red and you don't control yourself in those raw primal moments, it doesn't matter how much of a good Boy Scout you are in between those moments, right? The need to gain perspective and control of these states and moods is quite critical, this agitated unconscious repository of memories. This perspective and this control can occur through a sustained commitment to some program or system that allows for the development of objective emotional awareness. Again, tantric retreats with a partner, meditation and yoga of all sorts are all really good stuff for this person to get into. Ultimately, emotions are something that's hard to work through. Movies, music is good for this type of person. Anything that allows them to exercise it viscerally in a way that engages the emotions at that real level, which ultimately is probably at some point in the game is going to involve actual relationships with other humans. But there's much reward to be gained from any challenge in the auric field. And that's why life and its sufferings are more of a gift than most people suppose. So that was my rendition, or my reading, of Pluto, The Evolutionary Journey of the Soul by Jeffrey Wolf Green. I'm Dustin Cormier for How to Rock Astrology. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I love doing this stuff with you guys, reading these readings with you. If you enjoyed, let me know. Leave a like, leave a comment. And, if you enjoy the way I do this whole Pluto thing, keep your eyes open and subscribe to the channel. And you'll be getting notifications about more stuff that I'm going to be putting out at the end of this year and in the coming little bit. I've got lots of videos to put out since it's 2020, November of 2020 right now. The whole COVID and virus thing has got people like me inside recording videos like these. So expect lots to come. For now, thanks for watching, folks. See you guys on the flip side.